Oh, it's automatically recording. Maybe I can start streaming, Will. Maybe it works.
Oh, you can? Nice.
It shows start streaming in the top. Let's see if I can click it.
Oh no, that's not the one. That's not the one.
It says this is scheduled to be streamed.
Yeah, it does, but then it streams for some reason internally. It doesn't do it for YouTube. We had this before.
Okay.
But,
and you need to help me or Chris or somebody.
But the issue is I don't actually have this button anymore. Maybe because I'm not the owner of the... So if you go to the lower right with all these tiles, if you click there on this icon, next to the chat icon, what do you see? Like, do you see something that says streaming, next to polls, Q&A, breakout rooms?
All right, so there is live streaming.
Yeah. And then you go to YouTube, yeah. And then you have to, you don't see the channel now, that's the issue. Why don't I see it anymore?
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah, that's not good, right? So I cannot go to the channel because I don't have probably access rights there.
Or you transfer the meeting to me. Maybe that helps. I don't know.
Shall we do it quickly? So I basically give you back the meeting.
Yeah.
And you get an email.
Okay, I'll rejoin.
Send. Oh, everybody see my calendar now? Cool. So let's see if Will can start it. So as you can tell, right, it is the first time IOE is hosting this. That's why we need to hand over the rights and permissions of YouTube streaming and everything.
Yeah, but I don't see it, unfortunately. I don't know why it changed, but I used to have the streaming option. I don't see it.
Shall we start this internal stream at least? And then maybe give that link to the people on YouTube?
Yep.
This I can click, and this is the link maybe we can pass to people. It's getting recorded. And yeah, we can maybe try that on YouTube. Chris, can you help out there a bit? Okay.
Yep, I'm on it right now.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Let's not be bothered by that too much, right? We have lots of people here in this room already, and maybe more listening in, ideally through this Google Meet stream or maybe YouTube stream, but we don't have that running. So maybe even after the fact, we have at least this recorded and people can listen in after and further in the future. So welcome everybody to the monthly review meeting of the Layers project, which has now been officially handed over to Input-Output Engineering from before Input-Output Research, the R&D team. And we are continuing this very nice practice of looking at the progress every month, sharing what's new, demonstrating any things achieved in the last month. And there has been a kind of a gradual handover between IOR and IOE. So we're taking the Layers protocol from research and development more and more into development, although it's very much still R&D. And I will be watching a bit of the chat. We have people here. Feel free to raise your hand if you have questions throughout. There will be more time and a bigger Q&A part in the end. Let's see if we get to that and have time for it, but I suspect so. And in general, our agenda for today, which is we will look back on what basically happened in September 2025 on Leos. And so after looking, the biggest chunk of work right now is the SIP is now published for 1 month. So we have been seeking for feedback, seeing what the reception there is. There's been some further R&D discussions, similar and attached to the SIP, and some more findings or important things to tell. We have a guest demo already right away on the first monthly. So we're having a look in to see how some prototyping or tinkering with the protocol already happened in Goland, so using Goroboros. We'll look at another bigger piece we're working on is an impact analysis, and have then in the end a bigger look at the roadmap, so what you can expect throughout the year happening on the IOE project of Leos. In the end, we'll have time for Q&A and open discussion. So I hope you have brought some questions. So it's the update for September, yeah, to be clear, as it's written in the chat. And we moved it by 1 week because there was the Node Diversity workshop last week, and the end of October monthly will be end of October. All right. Without further ado, I'll just give it away to Will, which is our main editor on the set.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Sebastian. So yeah, today we can actually celebrate the Leos SIP first month anniversary after publishing. So far, we've received quite a lot of feedback, for which I want to thank you, everyone again who took the time to review it, to go through it. And on the next slide, maybe just to cover a few things that have happened so far. The changes that have happened are mostly around like clarifications and some improvements on like we're adding like things to like details to certain sections, but we did find a few gaps, so which we will address in different ways. So for example, here the requested CDDL changes, as well as some of the additions for the storage cost analysis. We will likely have a pull request later ready this week. And for the other things, such as the key registration and generation, we have like currently like a internal debate here whether this is something that actually requires a change for the SIP or not. And the main idea here is that there's quite some overlap with like the ongoing Paris work and its key registration, which Leos might very well benefit from. So we'll see how that turns out. And so the overall impression, though, has been very positive from what I can see, and also in respect to favoring the simplicity and our proposal for balancing like the trade-offs at this stage. So yes, and then with respect to like some of the upcoming meetings, so for instance, we've been attending the SIP editor meeting, and we plan to continue attending them in the near future. So to have like more open discussion around trade-offs and maybe other concerns people might have, to finally get the SIP into an approved stage. And then during the Node Diversity workshop that has just happened this month, there has been actually a clear push towards having a more Leos dedicated diversity workshop, Node Diversity workshop for planned for the next year. So with that, I think things are actually well set to basically yeah, I think we actually had a really good start for this month, spreading this proposal, getting people to notice it, voice their opinion. Nevertheless, for those that haven't had the time to really go through it and maybe add your input on it, then feel free to do so. We're still looking for people to basically propose their concerns or ideas for improvement. And yeah, with that, thank you. And I think I hand it off to Jurgis, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, thanks, Will. So have an update on the reapply part. So what's the situation? So reapplying endorsement blocks fast is crucial for security in linear layers. And why is that? Because reapplying a base is part of the critical path. To validate, to build your ledger state, for some chain, you need, and if this chain contains ranking blocks that contain certified EBs, you need to reapply the EBs on the previous state. So it's critical that reapplying EBs, now EBs, imagine, can be 10 megabytes. It has to be really fast. Now, current reapply implementation in Browse does check transaction validity, but it doesn't check, signatures or scripts with respect to the ledger state that the transaction is being reapplied. So what we observed and realized after discussions with the ledger team is that in Leos you can be even faster, and you can have a faster version of reapply, because these validity checks, whether the inputs of a transaction do exist, do not need to be performed. Their EBs can only be included in one place in the chain, just after the ranking blocks that announces them. And then their validity with respect to this context or ledger state is certified and ensured by the voting process. So if I see a certificate for this EB, I know that it's valid and all inputs exist, and all other conditions we want are satisfied. Hence, we can proceed in running reapply a lot faster by avoiding these validity checks. So after realizing that, obviously we need to take some more steps in seeing how much can we improve speed and in general how this will affect performance. I guess that was my update.
Thank you, Yorgos. So you see there's ongoing discussion. Really having the SIP out in public is really just kind of making the design space a bit more narrow, like a concrete thing, which keep evolving further and further and go into the actually very detailed questions, which never was able to go into that detail before. And our next section will be a brief guest part about looking at the SIP by Blink Labs, which is part of our roadmap, and creating a prototype is next steps here. Chris, what do you have with you?
Hello. So yeah, hi, I'm Chris from Blink Labs. For those of you who don't know me, I think a lot of you do now, which is cool. So as we've been going through and reviewing the Leos SIP, for a lot of this, what made sense for us was to go and actually start writing some of it. And I know that that's with the knowledge that it might all have to be thrown away and rewritten. That's okay, just right off. So, but it was to essentially inform us as we're writing it, what kind of changes do we actually have to make? What's the scope of a lot of this? So real quick, let me see here if I can share a window real fast that I can go over real quickly here. Give me a second. There we go. All right, so I've compressed some of this so we don't have to look at it, but you can see like we've added a certificate type for the Leos EB, and essentially built out that shape. We've got some innies in here because the key generation isn't done or anything, but this was just so we could figure out what would kind of be required. One of the things we also have to do is we kind of have to change our interface, because we have what we were calling the transaction hash. But now with Leos and the EB, there's the full hash of the full transaction, not just the body. So you can see we had a hash in the body. So we're renaming that throughout all of our code to match the more accurate ID. But that's a change. We've got this transaction reference, and a lot of what we were doing as we were implementing this, you also see comments and like to-dos that we did. I'm not going to go through every line of this or anything, so don't fret. But just to kind of tell us what other things we have to do. So we'll see that there's to-dos in and that sort of thing. We started implementing the block and the block shapes. This actually wasn't too bad, but we're not really sure exactly what yet to do to fully realize the references. So what we'll probably have to do is create inside of our block a hidden part of the struct that keeps the actual transactions, and we'll have to populate them wherever we use this in our data sources. So we went through and, like I said, we implemented both the endorser and ranking blocks. We have it fully hooked up as far as being able to create them and serialize and deserialize them throughout all of our stuff. And we've started working on the transaction and protocol parameter interfaces. We also started with the Laos Notify protocol and have started implementing through this. And we can see quite a few to-dos here and there. But, you know, we've started with the different requests and all of that. We've built out all of the different messages. There's a lot of hand waving, of course, because there are things that aren't necessarily fully defined yet. Like here's one place where we spoke about this. Currently, we have it blocking. And it was just because we'd have to revamp how a lot of this works. We copied it pretty close from, like, I want to say, local state query. So it was more of we were expecting it to be a request response. But as we go through and actually started implementing the protocol, like we said, a lot of the message shapes we just made up, you know, based off of what the description kind of was. But it doesn't seem like it's going to be too difficult to implement, you know, all of the different types of messages and pipelining and all of that. So, you know, I'd say from a standpoint, some of the harder questions and problems are things that we've already run into and kind of discussed that were called out a little bit earlier. Let's see. So anyway, that's essentially where we're at, and we're continuing through. We're going to build the other side of the mini protocols, and then our next step is to essentially build a fake Laos only node implementation that does nothing but talk to each other with fake data, just so we can show, you know, like what the communications would look like back and forth in practice and that sort of thing. And then we'll go to implement it over into Dingo.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And this is exactly what I think what will be happening in not only in Go, but also in Rust and Haskell. And I could now rehearse the song from Santi, right? I think we want to have node diversity right from the bat. And yeah, in fact, you're furthest ahead, and kind of the big item, the big feature, or the big thing, next thing we're doing is creating a layers network prototype. You see above. More details on this in a bit. Thank you for showing. And I will speak a bit more about another thing we have been doing. I hope the screen is visible again, right? So maybe a thumbs up or so. Yeah, good. Yeah, another big part of what we have been doing, besides creating the SIP, accepting feedback on the SIP, discussing with the community, and early prototyping and wrapping our head around the protocol further outside of simulations, is taking this protocol level specification, what the SIP is, and look into what it means, what it would mean in terms of like what needs to change in code base A, B, and C, and in particular also in the like block producing Haskell node, for example. And this is this input analysis document we'll be writing about. So the gaps before what Bill mentioned are kind of, if things are not going to be addressed further in further detail on the SIP, because, for example, yeah, it doesn't need to be going into that much detail in how client interfaces need to change. This document, for example, would be able to, and I'll just show you that briefly. So this is the document status right now, and it foremostly goes into some detail on what kind of systems in the Cardano ecosystem will need to change, how things will be affected given the proposed protocol. And we even took feedback from, I think it was even Aurora giving it on, hey, there is a bit kind of a, it doesn't go that much into detail about how the client interfaces would need to change, right? And that is something this document will speak about in particular, right? So if you look, for example, on the landscape of what kind of nodes types we have, right? Many of them are talking via notice client protocols. Client interfaces will need to change. The idea is that there will be a backwards compatible, for example, way in doing chain sync on a local client interface. Some other APIs like the UTXO RPC one are largely going to be unaffected, except the the actual block format, which could also be done in a backwards compatible way or in a so there's thoughts about compatibility layers to really kind of bound the blast radius of layers, any kind of consensus change really. And going through it further, right, we see that many parts of the ecosystem are really not affected by this layers protocol as we propose it, in particular because it doesn't require any API changes, transaction structure changes, and so on. Yeah, so this is a document which is currently in draft. It goes into detail in some parts, so the level of detail needs to be adjusted a bit, some more editing work required here. It should characterize what needs to change on the Cardano node in particular, but also can be more generic as we saw in the ecosystem parts, and goes down even to, for example, what are the actual requirements of the cryptographic scheme we will select, which is I think currently proposed as BLS, I think 12381 here, yeah, and so on. So this is the impact analysis document, which is currently in the works. And I want to use this quick also as an opportunity to kind of demonstrate briefly in how we are also modeling this ecosystem. What we you saw this in the ecosystem in the impact analysis document. We're using C4 modeling techniques to really show and kind of document in a way also like what is the context of the Cardano network in its core being comprised of multiple nodes, notable personas. So it's not only like a very technical, but also kind of can be quite a high level technique and documentation technique. We can drill down into more detail here. This is what we saw before, like what is the Cardano network as a system, if you want so. This is more like an excerpt. This is not exhaustive, of course, right? Because we just give an example that a wallet would be maybe using data nodes to connect to the network, similar to BlockFrost. We have block producing nodes and relay nodes. These are typical roles we would see. Relays will having like an upstream side of the network and a downstream side of the network. So this is really a peer-to-peer network. And there are some tools which dApp developers or SPOs are using to interact with these nodes, and like notable pieces of infrastructure we could kind of depict here. And it gives us an idea, and okay, how are these things related to each other? What are the interfaces at play? And you can even drill down further, and this is what we're really wanting to kind of now dive into. This is, for example, the architecture of the Haskell Cardano node today. You would see an upstream side, a downstream side, several network protocols, clients and servers talking these protocols. We see the mempool and the storage in between. This is a relay. You don't see a block production component here, but this is what the block producer is different to the relay. It's only the block production parts. And yeah, of course, this will need to enhance for layers, and we will basically detailing this at this level in further design documents, like what kind of components would be needed, what kind of additional work will be need to be done in one or the other aspects of a Cardano node. This will be built also while doing the prototyping to kind of validate these first thoughts about what needs to change and so on. So that's the kind of work you can expect in items like doing this impact analysis, documentation, technical specification work ultimately. And I will be diving back into the presentation here. Somebody really wants to speak, raise your hand too, right? Nothing too much on the chat, that's good. I'll continue. So the items you saw on the top right before, and like in these various sections, are ultimately items on our roadmap. These are feature items. These are kind of big chunks of work, which we are going to talk about in these meetings, in these monthly meetings. So they are kind of high level enough that we can speak about them, why we're doing it, what is in there. And most importantly, these are as self-contained as much to kind of really show what it is, right? We demonstrate what it means to have this network prototype, for example, likely next month, right? Or similar like we did today, or what is this kind of prototype we built, or this kind of experiment we conducted? What are the results of this? So we will see this GitHub project board, which is, let me just go back, is available through the website. So you'll see some kind of explanation of the roadmap and some of the objectives, which I go into. You will see a GitHub project linked here, which we're going to use throughout these meetings to kind of really look back on the roadmap, how it is evolving, and what we're doing now and what we're doing next. The project board is right now not public, but it will be very soon. So you will not be able to see exactly this view. These items you see on the board, these are public though, right? These are basically just issues on one or the other repository. For example, the Leos project repository or a consensus repository and so on. And now I want to use the chance to kind of explain a bit more these columns, what you see here. So our roadmap is basically comprised of objectives, things we want to achieve in a midterm, right? These are bigger things to kind of aim for. Having an improvement proposal was the first, and the last one will be having Leos hard forked. Although the further we go to the right, the more vague they become, right? They are in a way, there is a time, or there's a kind of a sequential, they're kind of sequential a bit. There is some evolution you can see from left to right in majority, and also what we would do maybe roughly after each other, but there is no strict ordering coming from this, right? So we might be working on a showcase, we might be working on preparing the testnet even before we kind of are done with like prototyping and the other way around. And if we need to kind of go back to refine the improvement proposal, that is something which will also come back here into the first objective. And these objectives are something which we believe makes sense for our various stakeholders. As I said before, the improvement proposal was the first. It is vital to have it. We want to really be very open in what we're building. So the community needs to learn as early as possible, like what are we proposing to change? So it can be discussed. So it is a proposal, right? And we need to kind of build acceptance by doing so, because ultimately the community will need to decide what is getting hard forked. And that's the very important first step already we're currently doing. The next objective is really creating supporting documents, specifications, to really take the whole developer landscape with us on this journey. So you could also say the objective is to kind of support node diversity too. So as a node developer, no matter what kind of node, the data node, the validating node, I want to really understand how this kind of works concretely in detail, and things like conformance tests are going to be pivotal here. So that we are agreeing that, okay, this is how Leos works, and not this way and not this way. So even with these new things coming up, formal specifications are going to be important. We're going to have conformance test suits here, and ideally diverse prototype networks, and ultimately also testnets. A prototype network is basically kind of a midway goalpost we want to really see. So we want to really see the throughput working. I want to see the kind of this, I think it's about 150 times the throughput we have today would be possible with some parameterization we propose. Going into this territory and really seeing that work out on first controlled environment, a kind of a local DevNet, then a more distributed but still not fully public network, and then further and further, is something we really need to do. We need to validate our assumptions as early as possible. We want to also show everyone that this is indeed possible and what it means to have that much throughput as early as possible, because it's quite abstract to think about, 200 transaction kilobytes per second. What does it mean, right? In terms of like, what does it mean for using Cardano at that pace? Some of the key security arguments which are already present in the SIP will need to be further explored within this objective too. So we want to really do benchmarks, load testing. We want to do targeted experiments of happy but also adversarial scenarios. Even try to do attacks on distributed clusters to really increase our confidence that this is working. And further refinement on parameters is also well in scope here. It's only a selection of what could go in here. Our biggest goal within the IOE project, the biggest immediate goal, will be having a public testnet. A public Laos testnet will help us and anyone really see what Laos means. Having this available as early as possible will allow anyone, any relevant infrastructure builders, able to integrate early and kind of already experience that increased throughput in their tools with their tools. So this will be very important. It is also basically also the goal we're having within this IOE intersect budget. So this is kind of the end of that first initial implementation work. And having a public testnet has been in the past proven to be very useful. I'm not sure if you all know, but for example, the governance changes were greatly benefiting having the Sancho network throughout, rolling out these features. Everybody could build tools around these. Layers will be not as kind of functionally changing Cardano. It's more about just the throughput will change, the way the network basically works under the hood changes, but on the outside, it will just remain largely same API. But again, having kind of large-scale experiments, load tests across the board with many people involved is going to be very important and really prove that this thing can work. And we need to prove that for long before we can really consider hard forking our more persistent networks and ultimately mainnet. This objective here is kind of the last catch-all thing that we have in our roadmap right now. It is notably not part of the roadmap we committed already with Intersect, but it is ideally just more maturing the feature set we already have by that time. Ultimately, we want to have also ample time and further validation that whatever we have implemented, a release candidate by that time of one or more, and likely by that time of multiple block producing and node implementations. We want those things available. We want to have a very clear idea about the protocol parameters, how these parameterizations would work out on these globally distributed networks. And ultimately, of course, governance actions will need to be put in place to walk the walk of hard forking the testnets and mainnet. And that's basically it. That's our roadmap. You will see these objectives. You will see us progressing largely from top left to bottom right. There will be things we do this quarter, things we do next quarter, more detail to come here. But that's roughly the plan. And looking forward to anyone's feedback, chime in on these issues. Everything of this is public and open. Okay, it will be public. This GitHub project right now is not, but I promise we will have it very soon. And so it's just making it visibility public. And I think this concludes the agenda we have prepared. So the showing work, what we did. We can now go to a Q&A. I see a chat is already quite active. I'm not sure who's taking, maybe some of the questions have already been answered, but maybe we want to have people kind of talk about their questions too. Now is the time. Yeah, we have one hand raised already by Jonathan.
Hello, I'll start off the talking portion of the questions and answers here. But yes, I have a very fundamental question, and I'm sorry to bring it up in this meeting, and I'm sure it's been addressed in previous presentations, but I want to make it more explicit to people watching back. there's no input blocks in this SIP, right? So there's no full implementation of Laos here. It's a sort of hybrid system. There's some stripping back of things that were in the research paper and indeed in the IOE deliverables in the budget, because there's an implementation of input blocks in the budgeted items from IOE. So there's a discrepancy here. And I just wanted to make sure that that's highlighted. Now, even though there is a discrepancy, the proposal itself, in my opinion, is very good. I think that it simplifies a lot of the process. As you've said already, it's easier to implement, and it doesn't require huge changes to APIs because there isn't this concept of having multiple parallel blocks being produced and worked out and churned through by various producers. So simpler to implement, faster to develop, and easier to get out, but it is not technically fully Laos. Is that a fair interpretation?
So it's not the research paper protocol or in that full extension, right? So we have Yorgos with us along the way. He's an author on the research paper. And it was also not very much at the time of writing, not the research paper, when I think some of the project proposals have been created. For example, sharding was never mentioned in the research paper, right? So if you really be like dogmatic about, the research must be implemented, then it is research and not kind of the real world best first step for Cardano.
No, that's totally fair and technically good. The only problem is there was a budgeted and ratified thing with clear and specified deliverables. So this probably isn't the right place for this topic, but I feel like the DREPs may need to be informed of the differences in some sort of just report that just says this is what was budgeted for, this is what can be delivered, yay or nay, do we proceed?
Yeah.
And that would just be to acknowledge that governance is a thing. But beyond
I've been anticipating this question a bit, right? So this is a slide covering the relevant things. You're talking about this proposal governance action, right? Which is the gov action of all IOE budget.
There was the IOE budget, yeah, and then within that there was the specification of deliverables, very specific word of deliverables, and one of those deliverables included things like input blocks, right? If you go into the PDF that's attached in the IPFS document, you'll find a full summary of all the implementation requirements for the budget.
Let's give the context there, right? So yeah, this is the governance action. This is the document which was linked. I think this one would be, let me just...
I like that you came prepared for this question.
I mean, if you start from the top, right, Laos is basically, this is the context of it, right? Or it's the gist of it, the summary.
And then there's a more detailed, the reason I'm referencing deliverables is the more detailed section.
Yeah, exactly. Let me just, this was this one. And what you're probably referring to. We can go through this, of course, right? I can comment, and I will comment on the technical side of things here. I cannot comment on the what is agreed with Intersect on terms of like concrete milestones coming out of this, right? And how things kind of are scoped. This is a document which was available to anyone drilling that deep into it, like what is Laos, what is the thing we're going to get, right? I can summarize just briefly. The goal remains unchanged. It is to improve the transactional throughput by orders of magnitude by using a new consensus algorithm, like transaction validation structure using endorser blocks and voting mechanisms in particular. That is unchanged, and that is something the R&D feasibility study has confirmed feasible. Notably, the work from IOR has also been ongoing for a year, and even like doing Laos, kind of finalizing, maybe culminating into a SIP, has also been a budget item. And a SIP as a Cardano improvement proposal, as the next thing we can take on Laos, has been part of that scope. And I think I wasn't around at the time when, for example, this scope has been written up. I think it could have been also written up like implement whatever the R&D comes out with. I think they would have not been given much more detail as well. And on the other hand, these things are kind of already kind of trying to be very detailed, right? Which is in a way good, but also can be problematic in exactly this case, right? Because it's about increasing transaction throughput, not about creating a sharded system, because that was just at the time of writing maybe an idea which was floating around and not a solved problem either.
I think the main issue is if there's a budgeted for item with a list of deliverables that has a certain value attributed to it, and then you're later reporting that you're simplifying that, it's going to be easier to implement, requires less API changes and less overall work. Does the budget match the work? And do the DREP support consistently applying the original budget? And that's a
good question,
governance
yeah.
decision. That's a governance
yeah.
decision, and it's outside of the technical discussion of the SIP itself,
Yeah.
which is again, I think, a good and simple implementation. But it's just one that needs to be addressed, because if we don't acknowledge the governance exists and don't acknowledge the contract changes and deliverables change and that they need to be verified by the same body that approved them, then we're ignoring governance. But that's my main point, and I'm sorry to bring it up here, but I just wanted to make sure it was
That's
recorded.
perfectly fine, right? You see, this was the case for it. Jeff, before you go, I want to say one thing. I heard from multiple sides, like the way it is scoped now, it made something which is terrifying into something which is actually doable.
No,
right?
exactly.
So
it's a really good thing.
So you could say like the outcome of the R&D work was Laos as it is in the paper is infeasible for Cardano the way it is without multi-year work, and really maybe, right, definitely not doable within that one budget item, which was never the plan, right? It was always begin implementation. But the question is, will there be 1 or 5 more budget requests like this after it?
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. And maybe, Jeff, you want to comment a bit on the IOEs. I think you're more equipped.
No, it's fine. No, thanks for raising it, Johnny, and you're right too. There is a discrepancy between what we knew then and what we know now, and you are right. The original proposal does explicitly call out a number of items that are within the original SIP that aren't in this SIP. I believe it's going to go to the product committee in Intersect for discussion to basically talk about the product outcomes of it. As Sebastian has very kindly highlighted, the outcome remains the same, which is that the efficiency of the system and the throughput, the transaction rate will be higher. So we're quite confident on that. You're right to call out the discrepancy on sizing. So my next call this afternoon is to talk to Jack and Matt Davis about some of this stuff as well and start that conversation. We haven't finished our IAs yet, so we don't know. We think it's the same size, but we're not sure. So we need to come back and do that piece of work and then offer that up in transparency through the product relationship with Intersect. So we are covering it. We are fully aware of it. And again, if you want to have a call with us, I'm happy to walk through that process as it evolves with you as well.
I think in my opinion, which may not be correct, I think one of the sensible things to do is to make an official report of the differences, put it up as an info action on chain, have the DREPs verify it. This is because delegated authority was not a thing that was allowed during the last budget year. The TSC could have maybe negotiated things if they'd been given delegated authority, but that was not the path we took. So because DREPs are the final authority, they need to be consulted.
Yeah, we're taking that steer purely from Intersect on how they want to deal with it, but we do recognise the change.
Now I open the floor to real technical questions because I'm sorry to be political.
No, it's fine. So yeah, let's get back to the tech, and I'll shut up as well.
We have a lot of technical questions actually on the chat, right? I'm just happen to only read one or two or the other. Duncan, very active here. I appreciate it because I've been waiting for your feedback on the SIP for a while. Maybe you wanna bring something concrete on the floor just for the remainder 15 minutes or so.
Me? Well, I've started reading the SIP, Sebastian. Sorry, I haven't finished yet, but yes, that's raised some questions for me already.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll take your word for it at the moment that it seems surprising, I have to say, that with only producing, one EB in between each RB, and there being quite severe limitations on when you can do that because of the timing, that you can still sufficiently often get a sufficiently big EB. But you've done the simulations, so I'll take your word for it. The thing that I've been asking in the comments here, and comment on the PR, the SIP PR. Yeah, I've been trying to understand this issue about the availability of EBs and whether we need to have them when we switch forks, because one of the original problems in Preos is that it asks that the implementation be able to switch forks, like a linear number of ranking blocks, in a constant amount of time, and which is obviously impossible. A linear number of ranking blocks takes a linear amount of time, and one of the things that the Leos paper was trying to introduce was to say, we can, it doesn't fully solve that, but it would reduce the constant factors, which is important when we're making all these things bigger to fit more transactions in, of being able to say we can adopt a chain and know that it is the current, achieve consensus on a chain without having had to download and do a lot of work, right? And I was trying to figure out if that aspect was still in there, and in which case whether we do need to have the contents of, whether there's a distinction between the currently selected chain and the prefix of the chain that any node that a node has validated, in the sense that it has computed the ledger state for it. That was sort of one of my first sort of questions, and then related to that was then the mechanism, like EB availability. But I don't go into all the details.
It's a good topic, right?
What's been in the chat here?
Yeah, it's a good topic because I think it's something which is not very verbosely described in the SIP, to be honest, right? So the multiple chains, how this whole thing behaves, and selecting the chain. Yorgos, you have your hand up. Maybe I think I remember you have a picture in one of your write-ups, which is about these kinds of competing candidate chains.
Yeah, briefly, as you say, maybe the idea is that you can, you download all EBs you share about, and in Preos you couldn't download all blocks because people can equivocate, and then what do you do? But in Leos, we have a way of addressing this issue specifically for EBs. So you can download all EBs you share about through a specific mechanism that rejects, let's say, equivocations in some specific way. And this way, switching to a fork is lighter, right? You only have to download the related ranking blocks, browse blocks, if you want, which you only anyway have to do in browse already today. So in some way, that's how we deal with this issue of chain switching. Now that blocks or data is a lot more in some sense.
But sorry, just to be clear, are you separating the notions of the currently selected chain for a node and the prefix of it that has been, for which there is a ledger state computed, or are they always the same? Like in Preos, they're always the same, and in the Leos paper they were different. Are they now the same or different in linear Leos?
I mean, if this is an implementation question, I'm not the right guy to.
It is.
No, it's not an
general,
implementation question. It's a design question.
Yeah, in general, you can have a valid chain, but you haven't computed its ledger state, if that's what you're asking. So
I think
go on, Nick, maybe you're more.
so. This seems particular. So one of the things that happened on the SIP is we've been discussing recently whether or not a block can have transactions and assert, or whether or not certs and transactions are mutually exclusive in a RB. And the discussion around that has actually led to kind of this particular question you're asking, Duncan. So like one of the benefits of not having a transaction alongside the cert is that you can immediately know whether or not the ranking block is valid, regardless of having the EB, right? Like if the cert is valid and the RB header is valid, then the RB is valid, even if you don't have the EB yet, right?
Yeah.
That's called out as like one reason we do want the mutual exclusivity. But the next question is, okay, well, what do we actually benefit from that? Like, it seems nice, but what's the upside, right? The upside, I think, is that means you can relay that RB confidently, right? You can forward it along to your peers, trusting that it's not invalid, and so you won't be punished for forwarding it. So I think the question of distinguishing between the best chain that I know is valid versus the best chain that I have the ledger state for, I think the upside is that you could relay that chain even if you can't extend it. And then Georgos likes to point out here that you could extend it if you created an empty block. But that is, I don't think any of that is laid out in the SIP yet. And I don't think it's hard determined a part of the design yet. But Sebastian and Georgos might have more to say on that.
So, okay, so closely related to that, it's not at all obvious to me how you're going to achieve making it visible that there are alternative EBs. Because as I understand it, you're not proposing to change the Preos protocols, chain sync, etc. But a node, you're adding a bunch of new ones. I understand that, but you're not changing like the existing ones, which means that each node only sees one, the currently selected chain of its upstream peer. So
that is true.
You don't get to see all the alternative forks. They're not visible to all nodes.
The new mini protocol, one of its responsibilities is to send the RB headers in isolation, not chains of headers, just RB headers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the RB headers are
Sebastian's
announcing
highlighting the
EB.
message.
Yeah.
And so if you see one of those that is a fork off of your current chain and it has an EB, right.
So you're not even
download
touching the
EB.
ranking block that the header announces. You're just refetching the EB that the header announces.
To be able to switch this chain in case your chain selection ends up in that one.
Although you need to be able to construct, it's not just arbitrary RBs, presumably it has to be RBs that actually connect onto your chain.
No, they just have to be validatable given a ledger state from your chain. Right, you don't need to have seen them all. Because you're not responsible for validating that EB. You just need to acquire it and check its hash.
And be sure that the equivocation detection works in this case, and you're not getting spammed with equivocated.
Is there any limit on the number of RBs you can make, like old RBs? Yet the equivocation gives you maximum on the EBs.
So the this mini protocol for exchanging the RB headers qua EB announcements, that can enforce equivocation detection. So a single peer
EBs.
should on the announcements
or on RBs.
So in linear LIOS, they arise from the same election, right? A Prouse election justifies announcing an EB, and so that's where you can define equivocation as the same Prouse election announcing different EBs.
So there's no separate.
Maybe that's not the best terminology for it.
No separate lottery for EBs, if that helps them. So EBs are generated when RBs are generated. Sorry, Jonathan, you want to say something?
No, it's okay. I'm over enthusiastic. Don't worry. I'm trying to put this in layman's terms for anybody watching. Like, my understanding is the old system was that it was going to start decoupling the blocks and have more input blocks that then went into endorsement blocks that then went into ranking blocks, and there was multiple lotteries for slots across all of these different layers. But now you're using the existing slot lottery for the normal Preos or however you pronounce that, blocks of the ranking block in this case, as it's been changed its name to, the RB. So the RB is the equivalent of a standard Cardano block right now, But if there's overflow, if there's a high level of demand, there's more transactions to carry than the full contents of the normal block. It spills over into an endorsement block and is referenced as the hash of the full transaction in that endorsement block, so that everybody can look at their own mempools and verify that they have these things available. And if they don't, seek out any gaps. And then validate that as a separate thing happening alongside the normal ranking blocks being proposed. So it greatly simplifies everything, because there isn't this idea of 3 levels of blocks being constantly produced and separate lotteries. It's all just based off the original calculation of how blocks were going to be produced by the existing SPOs, which to some extent might reduce the level of decentralization that people thought was going to come with Laos. More work to do for more people. It's the same people doing the work, but it becomes much simpler to implement because of that. Is that right?
I think your summary is good. You're bringing in some more things to discussion. Before it was about like how we have competing chains kind of be dealt with in terms of like downloading what and so on.
But
now you're talking about potential decentralization ambitions of just having different roles in the protocol, right?
But the reason I wanted to bring up that layman's term description is because I think it might speak to some of the I might be wrong, but some of Duncan's preconceptions about how it worked. Because if there is this limited existing slot lottery single SPO producing or not producing an endorser block as and when needed, it's a lot less complex and a lot fewer potential clashes.
I would like to comment on the previous discussion briefly with Duncan and Nick, right, and Yorgos. That is, or it's to our knowledge, that is just the same as it is in the research paper as in other variant considered so far. This is a detail as it has always been the same way, right? We must fetch all the EBs in order to be able to do the chain adoption efficiently or switching chains. So this is all the same. If anyone spots a difference there, right, on the, I would say, the tail end of the protocol, right? If you think about once the EB exists and certifying it, this is exactly the same as it is in the research paper. What is different is when can such an EB come into existence, and what's the production opportunity? That's the only difference. This one is coupled with the RB, and we actually speak a bit about like these alternative designs we discussed as more of extensions to this one, right? Because it's really the base building block we could see making, for example, the EB production run on a separate lottery is a step we could take, but this is already introducing concurrency, and we have quite trivial scenarios where an adversary could kind of create lots of conflicting transactions through this particular thing, although they depend a bit in information we don't have. For example, how much of a mempool can be an attacker partition on the network and so on. But you see, it's kind of really, linear layers is really a starting point. And of course, if you would do this, right, we need to solve a lot more problems right away. But just decoupling EB production doesn't necessarily mean we need to, or maybe it means we need to have sharding, but maybe not, because it's just some bounded concurrency. Of course, producing input blocks on a completely different schedule, right, creating a bit of a longer pipeline, right, is like wholesale concurrent block existence and potential conflicts and so on. It was a bit longer comment than I thought, sorry.
Actually, so I mean, I suppose the crucial point is that you're still doing EB propagation. The fact that it's not just that EBs are announced via RBs, but they are actually propagated, independently or announced independently as well,
Yes.
as in the original Leos.
It's just the opportunity, right? The right of creating an EB is just the same right of creating a ranking block with the VRF, the same VRF. There is maybe alternative designs, by the way, how we could kind of route this announcement into, maybe we could say there is an endorser block header, which is completely independent of the ranking block header, which also must be signed by a KES key, which is maybe more appealing and more in line with what you maybe would have expected in like a decoupled block production scenario, where it happens to be the same lottery. maybe that is preferable even, especially when you think about adding more things later on.
And this kind of allows Duncan, since you mentioned, to attach an EB to a specific context, which simplifies a lot other aspects of the protocol. So we don't have to, now it's obvious the context which the EB is validated with is obvious from its generation, basically.
Yeah, which is, I always argued, was very important. Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate this conversation very much. We have not had, we had similar technical detail yesterday on the SIP editors meeting. There was a good conversation already. And I think we said we want to have more of the likes if there is demand. I think maybe we can find on the SIP editor channel, or there's a channel on the SIP Discord, which we can use to maybe arrange another more technical call, again, following further on this, if anyone wants. Ultimately, the feedback should go into the SIP PR. That's where we ask for it. And we definitely have a next opportunity to see progress, and also in between, of course, these calls, Q&A sessions. Maybe I want to have one quick exit poll here. The monthlies of Laos have always been on the last Wednesday of the month. So the next date would be Wednesday, October 29th. Now we have still 26 people here. Can I get a show of hands? Who would prefer Wednesday or Tuesday? Just same time, but like maybe one day before. So everybody raise their hands in Google Meet here right now. Who would prefer Wednesday? Interesting to see Marcus and Alex, because they're actually having a conflict with the TSC there. Okay, 3 votes on this one. Now, any preference for Tuesday? Raise your hand now. The other 3 TSC members? It's a tie. Okay, maybe I'd call another vote some other opportunity. So until further notice, let's stay Wednesday, but basically I will try to cast a bigger net on this as I'm conscious of at least a conflict at the TSC meeting. But there will definitely be a monthly meeting again like this with demos and showing the progress on our roadmap. Maybe a few updates on the Laos dashboard coming there too. And I'm going to see you all in 4 weeks. Thanks everyone for joining.
Oh, there's no time. Okay.
No, there is no time, Johnny. I'm sorry. Send me a message. So stop streaming. Stop recording.